the most foolish thing to do would be to try to control the weather, because none of us have ever been able to figure out how to do that. And so, we do know that the sun will come out. We do know that warm weather will be here, later on in a couple of more months. So how do we accept and appreciate where we're at right now? And so it's doing some of those things. So again, trying to really lean into winter a little bit and some of the winter activities. If you're interested in winter sports like hockey, taking in a game, because that's something you can't generally do. I know last year was a little different, but generally you can't do that in May and June. So really sort of taking a moment to appreciate what winter does actually offer, because otherwise you can go into a place where you're very negative about winter and very negative about everything it brings. But guess what? It's going to come back again next year and the year after.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to have you for another episode on Plate Full of Insights, hosted by the team at Revive Wellness here. Once again, we are blessed to be joined by Sharon. You know me, I'm one of the hosts, Brandon. I'm also joined by one of my other hosts, Matthew. We've done a few episodes, Sharon, I think. So perhaps go back and listen to the other ones that we do with Sharon to learn a little bit about some of the other things that we've talked about. But I think you've been on the podcast enough where we don't need to do a thorough introduction. I'll leave the listeners / watchers to, if you want to learn more about Sharon, go have a watch or listen to the other episodes that we have. So we're here talking a very timely topic that has come up numerous times in my work with clients, comes up every single year. It's navigating the winter blues. But I know a lot of people, when you think of winter blues, what happens at this time of year, December, January, February, there's also the connection to this seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, or SAD. I feel like some people call it SAD. So we want to talk about the difference between the two today, some considerations, some differences in how we approach them, and some things to think about when you hear people talking about it, when you're looking on the internet for these topics. And we brought Sharon on for the episode today to talk about this, because this is, of course, one of the areas that she works a lot in, mental health. What better thing than bringing on a mental health expert to the podcast? So the burning question, Sharon, what is the difference between seasonal affective disorder and the winter blues?
So thanks, Brandon. Winter blues would be sort of just that feeling of wanting it to end, right? And looking forward to spring, getting tired of the darkness that we experience, possibly cloudiness, gloominess, that sort of thing. When that becomes to the point that it's impacting your functioning and impacting how you see the world, and there's been some significant changes in the way you navigate the world, that's when it could become a seasonal affective disorder. And seasonal affective disorder is an actual diagnosable disorder. It's a form of depression. So when we notice it's more than just feeling a little tired or a little irritable, you're actually starting to perhaps miss work, you're avoiding social situations. Maybe there's been changes in appetite where you're eating more, you're eating less. Even going as far as thoughts of self-harm or suicide start to come in. That's when we've kind of crossed that threshold, and it's no longer just winter blues. It's become an actual diagnosable mental health issue.
I feel like there's like the difference between winter blues and seasonal affective disorder. The way you just described it sounds kind of similar to how, trying to think of a quick example on the spot here. But I feel like there's other conditions that have kind of a more, people experience certain symptoms from that condition, but it's not clinically a clinical issue, or it's not diagnosable. And then people start to kind of intermix the two, and then it kind of gets lost in what's what.
Yeah, what I think of is the baby blues. When someone has a baby, the hormones are affected, sleep cycle is affected, and it's a big transition for the family or for the parent. And so a lot of people who give birth experience baby blues, but once it becomes clinically relevant is if it kind of flips over into postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis, because that's a condition that needs to be treated. Whereas baby blues or winter blahs, a lot of times it's making some minor adjustments in your lifestyle. It doesn't necessarily need to be something that you need a medical professional to support you with. So that would be something that I think is sort of comparable to winter blues, and seasonal affective disorder would be the same similarity between baby blues and an actual full on postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis.
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah. Um, I know you kind of alluded to, but to help people tell the difference between them, because of course there's on the one hand there's an annoyance with winter, and I just want it to be done, and it's annoying and it's a nuisance, but it's workable, it's not impacting function. But there's the ones where there is actually something that could be done there, which we'll get to the what you can do pieces. But where is there a line between the two that people can kind of consider, such that if there is a line and they feel like they're kind of past that line, then they can actually go talk to somebody about it?
I think that line is going to be a little bit different for everybody. So for me, I would suggest the line is when you start feeling like it's impacting your day to day functioning. So as I mentioned before, you're just not able to get out of bed. You're not able to experience joy in the things that maybe you once did experience joy. It's affecting your relationships with other people. Maybe you're using substances to cope, and that was never part of your coping strategies before. That's when we sort of know that it's sort of more than just like winter blues, and it's something that does require some clinical intervention. So that might be when you go and see your healthcare provider, a mental health provider, somebody who maybe has some knowledge or expertise in that area, and then the treatment is going to be different. So for winter blues, it might be something simple as positioning yourself next to a window, like I do here, or it might be if you're lucky enough going on a tropical vacation. But if it becomes to the point where it's clinical, it might require medication, it might require a little bit more intensive therapy just to deal with the emotions that come up this time of year. And you're mentioning that this is a very timely topic, and February, anecdotally, I would say, is the year that, or sorry, the month of the year that we see it the most. Because December, we're still celebrating the holidays. We're excited about what comes ahead. January, we're not too far removed from Christmas time. By February, we are done. We've had enough. And so February is sort of what I've seen that the winter blues and or seasonal affective disorder hit the hardest.
Hmm. I'm trying to think of the people that I've seen in the past couple of weeks here. Matthew, have you seen this in the clients that you've been working with in the past couple of weeks? Is this come up at all?
I'd say that this time of year, it's probably that plus other things just relating to a busier time of the year, just more obligations at the time of the year, less time off and less relaxation post Christmas and New Year's. So yeah, it's like things building up, and I'd say that plus other factors around this time.
Yeah. That I feel that actually that's an interesting point too, because I feel like the confounders, or the things that like are variables that complicate all of these pieces, because like I would imagine there's a lot of things that would alter somebody's enjoyment or feelings of joy in all of this, that would complicate this. So, or is that not the case? Is it usually pretty, like if you're working with someone, Sharon, and they're talking about these types of things to you, is it usually pretty? I don't want to say pretty clear. That's not the right word. Clear-ish. I don't know. Does that question make sense?
I think what you're asking is it always clear cut that it's seasonal affective disorder, or is it confounded with other things like work stress, family stress, financial obligations, that sort of thing? Is that kind of, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think, I mean, it can be both for sure. Like there's plenty of people where they feel like this is the only thing that they're struggling with. But it's also February is typically a tough time for people. This is when the bills have come in from Christmas time. This is when, today's Valentine's Day. Sometimes that's a tough day for people if they're not in the relationship that they want to be in or that they think they should be in, or more importantly, they've lost somebody that they cared for. So, and it just so happens that the winter blues tend to peak in February when we're dealing with all of that. And the days are very, very short. And so you go to work and it's dark, or you leave your home and it's dark, you come home and it's dark. And if you don't have a window, for instance, in your office, you're not seeing the sun at all for that whole period of daytime. And then you kind of go through the cycle again. So it can be quite depressing. We do know that darkness increases the level of melatonin that our bodies naturally produce. And so melatonin is a hormone that increases drowsiness and sleepiness. So it's not a coincidence that we come home from work in February or January and feel really tired and like we just want to have a nap. But that same feeling doesn't often occur as much in June or July because our melatonin levels are different. So there's definitely some hormonal issues at play as well this time of year. But like you both have mentioned, add all of the other stressors that often come with this time of the year, and you've got a good recipe for depression and or seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, and not only with what you were mentioning about the yeah, just how dark it is whenever you're outside. Sometimes I also think about how like when you're inside, it's actually quite sunny in the winter here. It's just that most most people often don't get the opportunity to enjoy that.
Definitely. And I mean, the last few weeks we've had wind chill warnings every day. It's not even recommended to be outside. And so, and if you are outside, it's probably a very unpleasant experience. Yeah. So it's not like summer where you can be outside for, a lengthy period of time and enjoy yourself. So I think, yeah, and even though we are a winter city, I think a lot of people don't necessarily see recreational opportunities as being something that they want to consider in the winter. I mean, we've got great cross country ski trails, we've got, skating, we've got different activities that we can do just in the winter. But I think it's one of those things where we have enough of wind chilled weather that it doesn't seem desirable to a lot of people. And as you were mentioning earlier, Matthew, it's by the time you get out to do those things, it's dark already. We only have a limited amount of daylight hours this time of year.
I lost count of the amount of people that have mentioned that. And I go to work, it's dark. I come home, it's dark. Yeah, yeah. That's the way it goes when you're in the uh, northern parts of the world. Well, I guess in very southern parts if you're in the southern hemisphere. Um, on that note, actually, are there some common things that are risk factors of sorts that make people more likely that they will experience this at some point in their life, or anything like that that people can look out for?
I think the normal risk factors for any kind of mental health issue. So I think a practitioner would want to do a complete mental health history before diagnosing somebody with seasonal affective disorder. So do they have a history of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, postpartum depression? Has there been anything like that? And then looking at, their family. So did their parents have depression or anxiety, or grandparents? So all of that would be responsible to kind of explore as well. And if there's any kind of change that the individual is experiencing, so a change at work or a change in their personal life, loss can be a very big contributing factor to depression. And then, as I said earlier, those things are just sort of compounded when we're not seeing daylight. And we're typically, I think, North Americans tend to be a little more isolated in the winter months as well because as you were saying, Brandon, we go to work, we come home and it's dark out and we stay home. and then we go to work the next day, and the cycle just continues. So we're maybe not socializing as much as we did in the summer months. Parks aren't really necessarily accessible for a lot of people in the winter. You think about outdoor patios and that sort of thing. That's not really something people are taking advantage of as much in the winter. So definitely that feeling of isolation can also increase low mood and feelings of depression.
Yeah, I can. And then you got to deal with all your neighbors' walkways not being shoveled and all this. Yeah, which is a challenge that, I mean, I've definitely had to work through with a lot of my clients lately. Matthew, I feel like you'd probably be the same to some extent in that realm, whether or not the conversation was around this topic.
Yeah, whether or not the conversation started there, it does come up.
And when you're talking about your neighbor's walks, it's your own, it's extra chores for you too. Shoveling, which is something that you don't do in the summer months. So, even things like vehicle issues, right? If your vehicle isn't running, then you're because the wind, like the weather's too cold or you're not comfortable driving on city streets, that just adds to that feeling of isolation, not being able to get out of your home for days on end sometimes.
To look at more maybe things that we can do to try to address some of those concerns, what are some things that you would suggest, whether it be things at home or ways to start conversations with healthcare providers about these subjects?
That's a great question. I think there's some kind of simpler things that we can do. And one would be, trying to get daylight when you can. So if you're in a work environment where you don't have access to natural light through a window, see if you can go for a walk at lunch or go for a walk during your coffee break. And, it might require bundling up and taking some time and effort to do that, but just allowing yourself to get some natural sunlight throughout the day when you can. Having your curtains open during the daytime when you are at home, if you're able to do that. As I said earlier, facing the window. And then there's on the market, there's all kinds of sad lamps and light boxes, which, some say that those are very, very helpful as well. So there's all kinds on the market ranging from very low cost to very high cost. So one would have to do their own research to sort of determine what option is going to fit best for them. And I think just learning to embrace winter for what it is, right? There's a saying that there's no such thing as bad weather, it's only bad preparation. So preparing yourself for the elements, right? If you know that it's cold out, bundling up, doing it in a safe manner, but getting outside anyways. Maybe learning a winter activity, so cross country skiing, snowshoeing, skating, winter cycling is very popular as well. So doing some of those things that maybe you take advantage of the fact that we have an abundance of snow and we have cold weather here. And even expressing or feeling some gratitude that we do live in a winter city, because that just makes the summer that much sweeter for us. So I often think I couldn't live in a city like, or a state like California where it's summer all the time, typically, because you would just kind of sort of take it for granted. So I think just really embracing the winter as much as you can. And if you're not an outdoor person, even just enjoying things like having a hot beverage in front of an open fire. So having your fireplace going, cozying up under a blanket. The Danish call that, we were talking about this earlier, they call that hygge. And basically, the term just means a feeling of contentment and coziness. So when you know it's minus 35 outside and there's a lot of snow, just enjoying that feeling of contentment, being under your blankets and doing something that you enjoy at home with your loved ones. So those are some things that you can try to do to deal with the winter blues or seasonal affective disorder. And of course, breaking up the winter by taking a vacation to a sunny destination if you're able to. And even if you're not able to, perhaps a road trip to the mountains might be something that just sort of also brings back that winter spirit for you.
I do love me a good trip to the mountains. That
Hmm.
I love that. Yep.
Hmm.
I can,
Less busy this time of year as well, typically.
yeah, true, true. That was an amazing list of things. Yeah, I'm just soaking that all in because it's One of the things, and this is often the case, where when you're on our podcast and we ask you these types of questions, there's a way of going about it that I appreciate, and the simplicity that you bring to the strategies that I hope all of our listeners and watchers also appreciate, because it is, there's nothing razzle dazzle about the strategies that you mentioned. They're all very much within reach for a lot of people. Some of them free, some of them cost a bit of money if you really want to be more extravagant with it. But a lot of them are not super complex, which I think is a good, probably intentional. Uh, but simple is often better, and I think the gratitude piece can help us recognize that. Oh, we can do these simple things, and if we don't let the annoyingness of cold weather take over all of the conversations that we have, either with other people or ourselves, then you can take some time and actually recognize the things that you can do as opposed to what you can't do.
Yeah, I think that's a really important cognitive piece of it that we can't. I mean, the most foolish thing to do would be to try to control the weather, because none of us have ever been able to figure out how to do that. And so, we do know that the sun will come out. We do know that warm weather will be here, later on in a couple of more months. So how do we accept and appreciate where we're at right now? And so it's doing some of those things. So again, trying to really lean into winter a little bit and some of the winter activities. If you're interested in winter sports like hockey, taking in a game, because that's something you can't generally do. I know last year was a little different, but generally you can't do that in May and June. So, really, sort of taking a moment to appreciate what winter does actually offer, because otherwise you can go into a place where you're very negative about winter and very negative about everything it brings. But guess what? It's going to come back again next year and the year after. So I think, yeah, yeah. So I think it's about putting that energy into something that we have some control over. So there's aspects of winter that you might not like, but are there some things you can try to embrace and try to appreciate about winter? And again, that might be what helps you appreciate summer that much more, knowing that we go through some pretty harsh weathers where we live, and it helps us appreciate those long, kind of lazy, enjoyable days of summer that much more.
Very well said. I would something popped into my mind, and I don't know if this is a thing. I'll let you kind of be the judge of this. If all of these things are uh, they are simple. I mean, they're not complex. Depending on the context and the individual, there can be probably quite a hump that people may have to get over, and to be able to enjoy some of those pieces. Can that be kind of a, I don't know, a litmus test of sorts? If any of the things that are like that you could do, or that you could work on, be it activities or rephrasing of things, and if this, all of this just sounds like it sucks and nothing's going to help and so on and so forth, um, what does one do if that's the case? Because I feel like that could happen some.
Yeah, it definitely could. So I think if you've tried everything that you feel is within your power, so like you've tried the positive self-talk, you've tried to sort of become active, you've tried to reach out to family and friends, and you're still just really feeling the mood just isn't lifting, and you're just not coping very well. That might be time when you want to bring in a healthcare professional. And so, going to see your primary care provider, maybe medication might be warranted at that time, so an antidepressant. Or you may be more interested in doing some therapy. And so that can be something that you can also discuss with your healthcare team. Is there a provider that you can access through work or through your benefits or through your medical team that you can talk through some of these emotions that you're having and just this feeling stuck and unable to kind of move forward in a way that's healthy for you? And so some of the things that, I encourage people to think about is what behavior changes have happened. So again, if you're somebody who generally enjoys spending time with family and friends and you find yourself withdrawing, or you're somebody who's using substances to cope with kind of the long days of no sunshine, then it might be that we've kind of moved into that clinical realm. And it may be something that we can't handle on our own completely. Now, it's not to say that you would necessarily need to be in therapy or need to be on medication for a long period of time, but it would be something worth considering because it happens where sometimes that's the only way that you can start to feel a little bit better is making some changes in your overall care that you have with your healthcare team.
Love it. Excellent, excellent stuff. Um, I always ask this because I feel like whenever I co-host with Matthew, he's the person that always makes sure that I don't miss anything. Before we wrap up the episode, Matthew, anything that you can think of that we maybe forgot, didn't cover, or something that you want to mention before we wrap up?
Yes, I think the last thing might just be, yeah, maybe some warning signs or symptoms to reiterate where maybe it is crossing that line from winter blues to where maybe we should seek professional help afterwards.
Okay. So some of the risk factors, warning signs would be any marked change in behavior. So sleeping more, maybe there's been appetite changes where you're eating a lot at night for comfort and that wasn't your normal pattern, or the opposite, you're skipping meals. And normally you were pretty good at making sure you have your meals. So paying attention to some of those sorts of signs. Again, if you recognize you're somebody who tended to be quite active or quite social, and now you're just sort of withdrawing from all of those activities, that's also a warning sign. Checking in on others. So if you've got family and friends who you notice haven't had contact with for a bit, or they just don't act like themselves, checking in with them. Is everything okay? What are you struggling with? And I think to some extent normalizing that we all go through a bit of, or we generally tend to go through a bit of a dip in the winter months, but has it become more severe for them? Does this seem a little bit out of character for them? And then, most importantly, checking to see if they feel safe. Do they feel like they're at risk of harming themselves? Do they feel like they're just not able to cope much longer with this? And those are important questions to ask as well. Because, when we hear about winter blues, it sounds sort of benign and minor and something that we all experience, like you'd said earlier, Brandon. It just kind of gets lumped in with seasonal affective disorder. But sometimes it can be more severe. And so just checking in on the people that we care about, the people that we work with, just if we've noticed anything that sort of suggests that they're not doing well. I mentioned self-medication before. So if you're somebody who tends not to use alcohol or other substances, and you found that, wow, I used to maybe have a glass of wine per week, it's kind of changed into an everyday thing. What is that all about? So just checking in with yourself and checking in with others if there's been any kind of significant change. Tearfulness, sadness, anger, irritability, any kind of changes in mood also is important to recognize. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily seasonal affective disorder. Like we talked about before, there's lots of other things that can contribute, but it's definitely something that we want to pay attention to this time of year.
Awesome. Uh, Thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us on another episode. It's always a treat to have you on. I love your perspective that you bring, and I hope other people do as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And with that, everyone, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I just said thanks for watching, so I hope you caught that little slip there. Thanks for watching and listening. If you haven't caught any of the episodes prior to either the most recent one that came out or perhaps the other episodes that Sharon has been a part of, then please check those out. And looking forward to the next one. I can't remember what the topic is, but it's going to be fun. See you next time.